So sorry for the technical difficulties. They can pry my Mac from my cold, dead hands, though. Yes, okay, let's get started. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for your patience. We are only 2 minutes late. That's not so bad. Even though I am a talker, I can talk even fast. This presentation is available online for you guys. It's in the Sched. So if I do go too fast, don't worry because you have it all and I have gifts. So let's get started. Hi, everybody. I'm Ines. I write kissing books, and today I want to talk to you about, this is the writing to romance to market, right? That's where we all are? Awesome, because I've got back-to-back going on here. So I want to talk to you guys about plotting strategies for commercial fiction, and because romance is my first language, you're going to have to put up with some romance talk. So let's get started with that, and I want to begin with a garden metaphor, because I know a lot of people are thinking about, I want to write my passion project. I have this really great idea to write a book, but if they were like me, writing my first book, I wrote an MMF. If you know why I put the M's together, good for you. You might have to explain that to the person next to you. It was dystopian. It was a little bit sci-fi. It had a little bit of magic in it. It was a little bit steampunky. It was a little bit of everything. And it confused a lot of people. It wasn't quite, there was no market for it. And in fact, I wrote it as kind of fan fiction. One of my very favorite authors, Keely Moon, wrote this amazing MMF. And I emailed her. I was like, when's the next one coming out? I want to see this character. I want to see that character. She was like, yeah, I'm not going to write that. And I was like, well, I'm going to write it. And I wrote it, and I published it, and it got maybe $100 worth of sales, and I understood why she didn't write the next one. So my gardening metaphor, I think that when you start to think about, well, not only do I want to write a book, but I want to write a book that reaches a lot of people, that sells. You want to find fertile ground in order to make that second part of that dream happen, because writing the book is hard enough. Finding people to buy it, that's a whole nother thing. And that's when we start thinking about fertile ground. Well, Ines, where do we find fertile ground? Well, it's out there for you. You just have to look at where the bestsellers are, because that's telling you where the readers are. You could look at the New York Times and look at USA Today, but we all know that those are curated and those are pay to play. A better place to take a look, Amazon charts. Hi, Amazon in the back. Another great place to look, if you're selling wide, Nook, Apple Books, go look at those charts. I also love the K-Lytics reports. I highly recommend that you go to one of Alex Newton's talks to understand what is his reports of the data of what is selling in the market. But this is how you start to see where the fertile ground is. That's where the readers are, because you don't want to try to plant a seed in the desert where there's no water, where there's a whole lot of sunlight, but there's not a lot of people or readers around. So I recommend that you take a look at things like the Amazon charts, Nook, Apple Books, and all those places. The next thing that you want to make sure that you do, at least that I recommend that you do, is that you take a look at the tropes. Tropes tell you what readers are constantly going for. And if you're a romance writer and or romance reader, and again, just for people who are madly clicking, don't worry, you have access to this in the Sched app. When we're taking a look at the tropes are telling us that what readers keep coming back to again and again and again. Just the same way that fans like to ship characters, ship real people, and then give them their names, like K-Fed, or that's the only one that I can remember right now because Britney Spears' her biography came out. But that's why we also have these tropes. There's only one bed, secret baby, which Harry Potter was a secret baby, or marriage of convenience, which happens to be my favorite. When readers see a pattern that they like, they're going to keep shouting about it and tell other people about it, and they're going to develop their own language around it. That's really what a trope is. It's language that readers have developed around something that they crave and they want again and again, and they also want to talk to somebody else about it. My catnip is marriage of convenience, which is a forced proximity trope. I will read it if they're in a carriage in historical times. I will read it if they're on a spaceship going into space. I will read if they're snowed in on a cabin, if they're snowed in on a desert island, I don't care. If they're forced to work together, because I'm a problem solver at heart, I'm going to read that over and over again. So you want to start thinking about what do you constantly reach for as a reader, because that's probably what you're going to love to write. But then you can start to find readers because they understand that language. 3 excellent places for you as an author to go and start to hone your trope abilities are tvtropes.org, which is a rabbit hole. I'm sorry if you get lost down there. It is massive. Another one, my friend Victorine is here at the conference. Make sure you go to Victorine's talks as well. Victorine wrote this free trope list that she has on her website. If you just type in Victorine trope list, you will find it. And Jennifer Hilt is also here too. She wrote the trope thesaurus, but she's also writing a number of thesaurusi. She's written the romance one, the horror one, and she's coming out with more. But those not only tell you what the tropes is, it starts to tell you the patterns that readers like about the tropes. So you want to take a look at that as well. So we've talked a little bit about the market. We talked about where you're going to find that fertile ground. Now I want to talk to you about the beats. These are what I call the obligatory scenes of romance. Really a lot of fiction, but definitely romance. Because we all, even if you're a pantser, you favor some kind of a structure. Even if it's beginning, middle, and end, you favor some kind of a structure. So for those of us that love to look at plots and love to look at structure and patterns, there's a rhythm to the way that we construct our story worlds. With story, we often curl up with a novel. We like to tuck into a book. And because of that pattern, there's a rhythm. It's almost like a baseline beat. And that's what I think that the actual beats of romance are. Here's the thing. You might miss a beat, but if you do, it's like a record scratch to readers. They're like, oh, something got messed up. Something went off beat for just a second. So I think that when you start to follow the structure of a beat, regardless if you follow the romance beats or the mystery beats or the thriller beats, that lays down a nice pattern for readers to, get the bop to. But then you want to start adding other things. You want to start adding the keyboards. You can tell I was raised in a band. My dad was a bass player. He would love this talk. But you want to keep it repetitive, and being repetitive is not a bad thing. It gives readers that curl-up feeling. It lets them know, hey, this is safe. This is what I know. This is going to be familiar. And then you also do the same, but different. That's what they like. Show me the beat, because all songs have a beat. They all have that drum kit, right, going, or some kind of a bass line to go, and then you add more on top of it. So you might use the hero's journey as your baseline beat. You might use the Save the Cat method, or Gwen Hayes' Romancing the Beats. There's tons of these, right? Tons of different types of bass lines for us to bop to. But you could miss, for example, in the hero's journey, you could miss the meet the mentor plot point if you're writing a romance, and it's no big deal. You might not have all 5, you can tell I'm a plot whore, I love plotting methods. You might miss the, does anybody know in the Save the Cat, there's a 5-part finale. Has anyone heard of that? No? Okay, that's okay. So you might miss that if you're writing a romance novel, but that's still okay. You can still have a satisfying happily ever after if you don't have that 5-part finale. And Gwen Hayes' Romancing the Beat, she has 19 plot points and 4 acts in her system, and I love Gwen Hayes' system. But I hate her Act 3, and I refuse to do it. That's when the characters break up. I don't like my characters to break up. I don't want to read it. I don't want to write it. But my stories still work, even though I don't have a technical second act for most of us, breakup. It still works. You can skip plot points. You can mix and match these different methods together, which I do. But what you can't miss are certain beats, because then that's when the record starts to scratch. And here are the beats that I think that you can't miss. The ordinary world, the meet cute, the adhesion, fun and games, the dark moment, the grand gesture, and the happily ever after. This is what I think you cannot miss if you're writing a romance novel. I'm going to break these down one by one. So, in the ordinary world, you introduce the hero and the heroine, or heroes and heroines, depending upon your jam. All plotting methods have this point where you have to introduce the people that we're going to follow. Here is where you establish everything that the reader needs to know so that they can step into the ordinary world of the main character. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're hooking the reader by showing them the extraordinary situation or the extraordinary qualities of that hero or heroine. Here also sets up that hero and or heroine's want, their GMC, their goal, their need, the thing that they want to achieve by the end of the story. I'm going to show you an example, and hopefully the audio works. I'm going to show you an example of this done in less than 60 seconds. So in that, we got all of Lizzie Bennett's. We got her goal, her motivation, and her conflict. If we know the story of Pride and Prejudice, we know that this is a young girl. Her mom's goal is for her to get married, but secretly she wants to be in love too. Her conflict is that the guy next door, he's going to be a bit of a jerk. And we move forward on with that. But that's her getting the ordinary world of the main character set up. The next thing that we would want to do is these characters have to meet. After you introduce the hero or heroes and the heroine or heroines, they have to meet. The meet cute is that first time that they meet on the page. Even if this is a second chance romance, or this is a best friends to lovers, even if they know each other from before, this is the first time that the readers get to see them meet on the page, and we want to make it memorable. For example, if there's a wedding planner who is about to plan the bride's wedding, and the groom, she happens to fall in love with the groom, that would be a really hard thing. The hero and the heroine have met. That was really cute how they meet. And now we need to give them a reason that they're going to stay together. That's the adhesion point. So the adhesion point is the reason that the lovers must remain together for the duration of the story. And here's where I'm going to come back to trope. Think trope when you think adhesion for a romance novel. That might be my favorite, the marriage of convenience. There's some reason why they have to stay together, why they have to get married. Maybe there's an inheritance. Maybe he's trying to impress the boss. Maybe her ex-boyfriend has embarrassed her, and she just points at that guy, and that's my boyfriend. Maybe it's an office romance or boss employee. Maybe it's fake dating. Maybe it's a sci-fi romance, and the alien has abducted her. Whatever the reason, that's the reason for the whole story, the reason that they're going to stay together. Again, my favorite is Marriage of Convenience, so I have a whole bunch of Marriage of Convenience ideas up there, or stories up there. Green card, they get married because he's trying to stay in the U.S., and she needs to be married in order to access a greenhouse on the top of this really exclusive building that only married couples can live in. There's Muriel's Wedding, where she's just a disaster, and he's a soccer player who's trying to stay in Australia. And then my favorite, The Magic of Ordinary Days, where she's a student and she got knocked up by her professor. And he's a simple farmer hoping for a wife for his kids that he had with the woman that passed away, and they fall in love. So these are all adhesion points. So once you've got the adhesion going, then we're going to start the fun and games. The fun and games is that series of scenes where they fall in love. Like, for example, in the film Dirty Dancing, but you guys know the song Hungry Eyes, so you can sing along in your head. But let's talk about the fun and games, which is the series of falling in love moments that we can always point back to and say, that's when it happened. If we've seen the film Dirty Dancing, and we all should have seen it like numerous times, this is when Baby and Johnny fall in love with each other, when he's teaching her to dance. And you're about to see a series of clips of that process of teaching her to dance, of them getting to know each other. Some of parts of it contentious, some parts of it is like, oh, I kind of like this guy. Oh, I kind of like this girl. But this is what we call a montage in television and film. The montage is typically used as shorthand to convey a complex idea quickly. And in TV and film, we do it with shots. In books, we do it with short chapters or short scenes. On screen, the montage is that series of clips. It's from different scenes, different sequences, all to convey that idea of, hey, they're having fun, and they're falling in love, and this is the game of love. Maybe they went to get ice cream. Maybe they took a long walk. Maybe they're sneaking glances. Oftentimes in a rom-com, there's a dance sequence in a rom-com movie. In a romance novel, this is often told through a handful of scenes, sometimes used in narrative summary, and it's always in Act 2, almost always in Act 2. These are the scenes that the readers can always point back to and say, hey, this is it. If you speak plot, this is the test allies and enemies moments of the hero's journey. This is the antithesis phase in the Save the Cat. I've never met anyone who knows that Save the Cat is divided into thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. One day I'm going to meet my match. This is the falling in love phase of Gwen Hayes' Romancing the Beats. It's the inkling of desire, the deepening of desire, that maybe this could work. That's happening in these montages that we write as short scenes or narrative summary to showcase that the hero and the heroine, or multiples, are falling in love. Which brings us to my least favorite, the dark moment. Do they have to break up? I don't believe so. I don't think that the dark moment has to be a breakup, but I firmly believe that the relationship should be tested at this moment. You could pull them apart physically, but as long as you poke the relationship with a stick, I think this is what is the important part of the dark moment. They need to have a moment where they either lose or they have the threat of losing everything that they just gained in that dancing montage up in the Catskills. But they can only achieve their happily ever after once this test is completed and passed. For example, if you've seen the film Notting Hill, where this amazing actress, who was played by Julia Roberts, meets this everyday average Joe, and they start to fall in love, but their relationship gets tested because of her celebrity. And this is the dark moment where the relationship is being tested and it looks like it is not going to work out. Definitely have broken up, but hopefully there's time in their love story for a grand gesture. The grand gesture usually is done by the character who has the most to lose or who has changed the most, and they make a grand overture. But honestly, I always give it to the guy because I love a good grovel. So that's my decision. So they have to prove that they learned the lessons that they were being taught in Act 2 when they had that test allies and enemies, when they had the fun and games and they got to know each other. So some examples, this is from the film Love Actually, some really great examples of grand gestures are Colin Firth's character when he shows up at the restaurant and everything gets lost in translation because he and his mate speak a completely different language. There is the Hugh Grant, hello again Hugh, there's the Hugh Grant character who plays the Prime Minister who falls in love with his aide, and he goes around knocking on all doors until he finds her and he's able to confess his true feelings in front of the whole town or village. And then there's Card Guy, who I didn't know was Andrew Lincoln. Okay, that's Sheriff Rick, if anybody it's like me and they didn't recognize that. But there's Card Guy who falls in love with his best friend's wife, oh no. And she is obviously in love with her husband, and he still wants to have both of their friendship. So he puts his feelings on the card in the most meme-tastic display of a grand gesture ever. But those are some of the kind of ways that we would showcase a grand gesture that would bring us then to the happily ever after, like in Romeo and Juliet. I thank you for laughing, because it is not a romance. Just as much as we love The Notebook, it's not a true romance. There's romantic elements. Say that again with me. That book has romantic elements, but it is not a romance because it does not meet the crucial requirement of having a happily ever after or happy for now, where it's clear that the lovers will spend the rest of their lives together. I have the example here of Jerry Maguire, where the two of the three most famous lines of that movie, where he comes in and she says, "You had me at hello." He says, "You complete me." Fantastic, everybody knows those, but I'm gonna keep going so that we can have time for questions. And I'm just gonna point out that if you write paranormal romance, which is another language of mine, in paranormal romance, there's two additions to these beats that I just laid out. I believe that you also have to have the supernatural person have a show of power. So if they're a fairy, then maybe they change the weather or something. If they're a vampire, they're gonna show their teeth, they're gonna fly, they're gonna be old but look really young. So there's a show of power. And also what's super popular nowadays is that the supernatural being, usually the male, almost always the male, claims that she is his. You are mine. So those are two additions that I want to highlight with the paranormal romance. And I also want to point out something with the romantic comedy. Because romantic comedies are funny because of the comedy, right? No, they're funny because of the deception. Michael Haig talks about how characters are constantly having a struggle between their identity, who they think they are because of a wound from their past, and their essence, who they want to be once they've healed or once they've learned from the wound. It's the deception in a romantic comedy that makes the wound identity really clear, because they're pretending to be something that they're not in a romantic comedy. And they're likely pretending to be their essence, but not the highest form of it. The deception could be mistaken identity, a bet, hiding their true feelings when the love interest takes an interest in another person, like a fake relationship. Or it could be the bet trope, like with How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days or 10 Things That I Hate About You, where it's mistaken identity. Or it's mistaken identity with Coming to America or The Prince and Me. You know that there's going to be a revelation of the deception, and that's what keeps you at the edge of your seat. If you keep the situations funny around avoiding the revelation, that's what people are starting to laugh at, and that's where the tension comes. And once the revelation happens, that's the dark moment for a romantic comedy. I'm not going to show those examples either, because I have successfully left time for questions if you have them. But before I stop talking, I have a free guide. It's my romance roadmap, where I take those beats and I break them down further, and I give you more concrete examples, including, if you've ever met me, you've had a conversation, you know I like a process and I like to break things down by minutia. So I take the grand gesture and I break it down further into 5 different types of grand gestures. I take the dark moment and I break it down further into I think 5 different types of grand gestures as well. I love to break things down to their itty little bits. I love long division. So that is my free gift to you. If you want to learn more about romance, I write both sweet and clean and wholesome romance, and I write spicy romance. So I have a course, Writing Sweet, and a course, Writing Dirty, and those I offer to you for $25 each. And that's it. That is how to write a romance to market. Thanks, guys. And if there are any questions, I am happy to take them. You just have to come to the mic so that the people who are streaming can hear you as well.
Thank you. That was absolutely brilliant.
Yay.
I loved it. I just wanted to ask about meet cutes for friends to lovers. If it's like a best friend situation, how do you make that meet cute? This is how it's going to be. Like,
I have a whole thing about what I think meet cute should be about, and it's in the guide, and the guide is free.
Sorry, that was...
Yeah, I have a whole 4-step process to meet cutes. But remember, what we need to remember about meet cutes is the first time that the reader sees them meeting. That's what you're making cute.
Okay.
So if they've known each other before, and she finally is, when you introduce her, she's finally realizing, I think I've got feelings for him. And then they meet, and he's with somebody else. That's a meet cute, even though she knows him. So it's it becomes a part of the situation that you put them in. That's how I think about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I did not do it, officer.
Well, are you one of the Warner brothers or sister?
I get it.
Okay. Can you have a romance where you don't know for most of the book which love interest is going to win? And
Love triangle.
Yeah, what would you call it? Okay.
That's a love triangle.
Okay, and how do you work the tropes into that? Because you'd have to have 2 of everything, wouldn't you?
Not necessarily. Here's the trick, my belief of the trick of a love triangle. Let's say it's a girl and she's in love with this guy and that guy, or they're vying for her attention. One guy would be perfect for her in her identity. The other guy would be perfect for her in her essence. Remember we just talked about essence and identity? That's how I think a love interest should work. So one guy's wrong for her because he would be right for her wound, and if her wound kept continuing, but once she heals from that wound, the other guy is perfect for her.
have a question from our streaming community. Is the grand gesture the finale or the climax? And how much time, like how much story or plot happen after the grand gesture and before the ending or the happily ever
Okay,
after?
that's a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah.
You might have to repeat some of that.
Okay, is the grand gesture the finale or the climax?
It can, don't you hate it when someone's like, it's up to you? It can be. They can have that grand gesture, and if there's no more story after that, if you have wrapped up all of your subplots, all of the loose ends, if they are now both living as who they truly are, you're done. If there's more story after that, if you left some subplots dangling, like if this is a suspense and they still have to get free, even though he's groveled, he's come and he's rescued her, or she's come and she's rescued him, and they've done the grovel, and they still have to get out, there's more story to happen. So one of the reasons I call myself a plot whore is because I'm reverse harem when it comes to plot, and I will take a whole bunch of them and I will mix and match them together. So if you have a romance that's also suspenseful, well, you've got some more plot points that you mix all of the romance beats in there, but then you still have to contend with the suspense plot points and the suspense beats. So you're kind of playing Jenga with them, and you're going to have some dangling. You still got to deal with remember the killer loves to have, or the villain loves to have that speech and praise of the villain moment. Well, the hero and the heroine may be like, we love each other, we're good. When the villain's like, that's cute, I'm still gonna kill you. And they have to go and finish out those other points. What?
I think you answered it.
Okay, good.
And then the second question is, are there different essentials for an adventure romance or suspense romance?
There are. I know them for suspense because I love suspense. Adventure, I haven't studied that as well. I will tell that viewer this. I have a free podcast. It's called Ines Johnson is Having a Breakdown. And on one of those podcasts, I break down the suspense beats. I couldn't tell them to you off the top of my head, but in there, I take a deep dive. I think I call it the thriller beats. So you can just go on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts and look for Ines Johnson is Having a Breakdown and look specifically for the thriller beats, and it'll tell you what you need to know in that episode. Hi.
Hello. On my romances, I think I generally have all of these components. However, I struggle with the timing.
Mm-hmm.
So do you adhere to the fact that, in a contemporary romance, they must have the meet cute in the first 4 pages, and then, at 25%, they must have bonded together on their journey, which will turn into the romance? Or it feels, structure is good, but can it be overstructured or understructured? Even though you hit all the points, do the beats have to be at a certain time?
I should have told you guys when I came up here that I come from television. I'm a trained screenwriter, and I've been reading books since I could put two letters together and make a word. So in television, there are rules upon rules because we had to contend with commercials. There's structure upon structure, right? So I'm used to that structure, and I just assume everybody knows that structure. That's my disclaimer. I do not believe that, I like to know the rules because the rules will tell you why you're doing something. I don't think that you have to then take that rule and say it has to be at 25%. This has to be at 50%. This has to be at 75%. There's a reason for it. And I believe that the reason for those markers was that you had to introduce the hero, you had to introduce the heroine, they have to have a meet cute. There's a reason that they don't think this was never going to work, because otherwise they would have been together. There's a reason that they adhere to each other, right? You have to get through all of that stuff. And I think that people didn't have the language to know that you have to get through all of this stuff before you get to the meet cute, right? So I think that the important thing is, did you get to all of those expectations before you got to that meet cute, or before they have their fun and games, or before they have that dark night? Because that's what no reader is going to look at your book, count all the pages, take out their calculator, do the division. Nobody's going to do that. But they're going to know if you missed, remember I said the record scratch? They're gonna know if you missed a beat. That's what I would contend with. And I bet you when you're just focusing on that, on checking all those boxes off that you know you're supposed to do, you're gonna look up and you're like, huh, that's 27%. That works for me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, stranger.
Hi, stranger. So my biggest struggle whenever I'm writing contemporary, especially, sweet or even spicy, but contemporary romance where there's not like big overarching plot where it's just about two people falling in love. My biggest struggle is that mine are always like really short. The last
That's the problem.
no, like 20,000 words short. And so I'm wondering how you go and expand on something where there's not an alien that's also trying to murder them, or there's not, a werewolf war that they have to deal with. So how do you make more plot out of just, those essences out of the main beats?
The easiest answer is subplots. Let me take it back to television for a second. You know how when you're watching a television show and let's say it's a police procedural? Like, one of my favorite police procedurals is Castle. And so in television we have story questions. And the story question of a police procedural is, will they catch the criminal? Of course they're gonna catch the criminal. But that takes you, that's the A line of the story that takes you from the beginning of the episode to the end of the episode. If anyone ever watched Castle, you know that one of the subplots, the B story, was Castle and Beckett, and will they get together? And that that went on and on and on, and their relationship went up and down. So that becomes a B. And then there was a C plot. That could be someone else in the precinct. That might be, remember, there was the subplot of Beckett's mother, who was Beckett's mother's killer. So even though you're still telling the same story, there's subplots of the story that all have to relate to the main A line of the story. And so you're taking these little asides to fulfill that plot. And just as the A-line story has an Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, has all of its beats, the B story, the C story, they all have it too. So what the easiest answer for this is to take some time and sit down and make sure that your B's, your C's, your D's, that they all have the beats.
Excellent
Thank you.
panel today. I have what I hope is a fairly simple question.
Let's try it.
Have you found the sweet spot for length?
Have I found the sweet spot for length? What I do when it comes to length is I listen to Alex Newton. And here's why. I love the K-Lytics reports because I want to do just enough so that I can get to the next thing. So every time the K-Lytics reports comes out, I take a look and I see what is the average length of a specific genre of books. And there's a report that will tell you that information. I take a look at that, and that's my goal. Because if readers are going to buy, when I started writing sweet romance, and the first Clean Holes report came out, I think in 2017, I think it was. And when I wrote my first sweet romance, I saw that readers were buying 25,000, 30,000 word books and spending, at the time, $2.99 on those and having a great time. Which is why I scoffed at you, Kate, when you were like 20,000 words. They were buying that, and they were loving it. And so that's what I did. And then if I look at something else, and something else says, oh, they want 50 or 60K, that becomes my goal. I'm very data-driven. I look at what can I do so that I can get this done and get to the next thing. Michael Anderle talks about the minimum viable product, and that's what I focus on. But I want to point out that another strategy with writing short, writing like 20s and 30s and 40s, I had the notion that because I come from television, I'm so used to episodic, I wanted these readers to start chain smoking my books. And at 20,000, 25,000, you could read that in a sitting. I'm like, oh, that was great. And then also in television, with the episodic, we do these things called open doors, where you finish off your A storyline, but maybe you leave your B storyline open on a cliffhanger, which is fine, because the A storyline got closed up. You can leave the rest of the plot points dangling. So I would open a door for that B storyline, and then they would immediately buy the next book, read through it, and then there would be a C storyline going. They would buy the next book, read through it. So just whatever you do it with a strategy. Don't just do it because, oh, I guess it's supposed to be 50,000 words. Why? I got 40 seconds left, and I think that's about it. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for coming out. Please feel free to take advantage of that free download, and feel free to stay for the next one because I'm here for another hour.